Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar, Review of the Nursing Home Medical Record, What Makes It Different. During today's program, our presenter will cover the following: what makes the nursing home medical record different, resources needed when reviewing a nursing home record, common areas of nursing home negligence, and identifying potential pitfalls in the record. The presenter for today's program is Varsha Desai. Varsha has over 19 years of experience as a registered nurse working in various sectors of the healthcare industry, including acute care hospitals, nursing homes, home health care, group homes for mentally disabled, medical insurance carriers, pharmaceutical companies, and clinical software development. Her expertise includes clinical nursing, medical and disability case management, drug safety surveillance, and professional healthcare management and consulting. We will be taking 2 question and answer breaks during today's presentation. If you have a question, we ask that you use the chat or Q&A feature located on the right-hand side of the screen to submit your questions to the presenter. We encourage all attendees to submit questions throughout the presentation. Tomorrow morning, I will send out an email with a link to the archived recording of this webinar, as well as a copy of the PowerPoint presentation that was used during today's program. We do ask that you take time to fill out the survey that will appear on your screen after today's program is over. I now invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy. I'm going to turn the presentation over to our distinguished guest, Varsha Desai. Varsha, the program is all yours.
Thank you, Matt. Just want to take a few minutes to thank everybody for taking some time out of their afternoon and listening to me for 45 minutes talk about the nursing home medical record. And just to add to what Matt told you about my background, I do continue to work clinically as a nurse, and pretty much my background continues to be in the nursing home assisted living settings. I do take that on at least 1 or 2 days a month, mostly because I still enjoy working with the population, and it's probably a population, as many of you know, is not always best served. So today the topic, like Matt said, is review of the nursing home medical record and what makes it different. And part of the reason I thought this would be an interesting topic when I spoke to Matt is I look at regular medical malpractice cases from hospitals and rehab facilities, in that what makes the nursing home medical record different is, one, it's a different population, and it is a different record. And hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll be able to glean some of that. We do have limited time, so this is not going to be the be-all, end-all of nursing home information. Hopefully my goal is to impart something that if you're new to looking at these cases or experience, you'll pick up something that will be helpful or something you didn't know. So we'll go ahead and get started. And Matt, you'll just have to help me because this isn't moving.
Yep, there you go. Let me take a look. Okay, it should be okay now. Let me try to go back to 01, the first slide. Okay. Can you go back at all? It's not responding to you?
No, it shows me the 1 arrow, not the 2 like we normally have.
Okay, just give me a second here. Okay, try it now.
Okay, I'm just...
Okay, if not, just I can control the slides for you. Tell me when you want me to move them forward.
Absolutely. Okay. First, the actual record itself, and as a nurse, and as somebody who assists attorneys and insurance companies with looking at these, the record is so important. And I wanted to focus on that first because there are many differences between this and a hospital record. The first one is, and I mentioned it before, these are residents. When I go in and work in a nursing home, or a long-term care facility, skilled nursing facility, all the various names they go by. I refer to the people there as residents, not as patients. We usually use the term patients for our acute care, hospital, but these are residents. For most people, this is their home. This is, where they are at some point in their life. And they're not always elderly. There are people who are much younger than what we consider the senior citizens in there for various reasons. But we classify them as residents, and that it's important to know that term. And I actually heard an attorney speak to that it's important that these are residents, to convey that this is their home, this is where they live, and by being in this place, they obviously expect a certain level of care. So I'd just like to make that as the first point for the nursing home. The second thing is electronic versus paper. Any of the facilities that I work in are not electronic medical records. It's very different than the hospital. Again, the hospital setting, to understand that. I have to say, I don't think I've ever gotten an electronic record to look at, or I've never worked on an electronic system. Almost all, if not the majority, are paper. It's regular paper charting, and that's just not for nursing. That's for physicians, nurses, therapists, dietary, social work, any of the disciplines that are involved in the care of the resident. The only exception to that, which you might get electronically, and you might have to request it because it is electronic. Many of the nursing homes have, you have the nurse that's there, and then you have somebody called a certified nursing assistant, also goes by the term CNA. And the CNA, which you'll hear several times throughout the presentation, is the person who is assisting the resident with bathing, feeding, toileting, dressing. They're involved in a lot of these, what we call activities of daily living, transporting them from one place to another, from the activities room to the dining room. Many facilities use it's electronic in the sense that it's a touchpad. So as part of the responsibility of the certified nursing assistant, for each resident that they are responsible for, they have to, during their shift, which is normally 8-hour shifts, 7 to 3, 3 to 11, 11 to 7, they're going to go in and all the ADLs, those activities of daily living, transfers, feeding, bathing, toileting, there's little indicators, and they'll put in, did this resident need help feeding? How much did this resident eat for the meal? How many times, if they're incontinent, how many times was the adult brief changed? And there's a whole list. So if you don't get that in the record in a paper format, you may, and if you don't see anything that says activities of daily, they're sheets, and they go by each day, and then they're divided up by shifts. That's really important to have that. So if you don't have it in paper, you may have to request it separately because they have an electronic version of it, and it'll come out as a printout, and you'll see it wasn't done by hand. Many facilities that I work in do use that as an electronic system. It speeds up the documentation aspect for the CNA. So just keep that in mind. Nursing home, primarily paper. However, electronic may be the certified nursing assistant records, which are vital to looking at. As I mentioned, the standard nursing home chart is different than the acute hospital medical record. We use different tabs, and we have additional documents which you absolutely have to get, and I'll let you know which ones those are, that you wouldn't see in your acute hospital medical record. And possibly in other type of facilities too, like rehabs and that. The first one, which is probably one of the most important, and it's done on admission into a nursing home, is what's called the MDS, the minimum data set. It's a really lengthy document. I think it's like 35 pages long, and you can get a copy by going to www.cms.gov. They have there's various versions that are released, and you can see what one looks like, and I can even attach it to this presentation. I can send a copy to Matt so you can see. And you have to make sure you have all the pages to it. And basically this document, so Mrs. Jones comes from acute hospital. She now needs to be in a facility for rehab and nursing care. She has wounds, whatever the case. This is done, and it's usually done by a nurse who is trained in understanding what the MDS is. There's little boxes, and it's basically how they get paid by Medicare. There's a score, and that score reflects an acuity or how much care this resident is going to need, and that is one of the measurements for reimbursement by Medicare. That's normally in the front of the chart. It's got a separate section, so you have to have that. If you don't have that, it's one of your starting points, because you're going to compare that MDS to the hospital discharge summary to make sure that they should look similar. If they weren't able to walk at the hospital at discharge, they certainly shouldn't be able to walk on admission based on the MDS. They shouldn't be just miraculously, now I can walk 24 hours later. The next piece of information that is specific to the nursing home is something called the RAP, or the Resident Assessment Protocol. This goes hand in hand with the MDS. The MDS provides what I like to say part one of an assessment. It's the preliminary screening. It identifies the potential problems, the strengths, and then that triggers, what the care plan is going to be for this individual. The RAPs are, how do you take the information from the assessment and now apply it? And RAPs are not just a one-time deal like the MDS. If there is a change in the resident's condition, it could be a fall, very important. It could be a change in dietary status. In other words, they could eat, regular food like you and I, and now they need a pureed diet. Those things are what they call a RAP trigger, or a condition that is a trigger. When there's a trigger, that RAP, it's basically a reassessment. They have to be reevaluated through the RAP document. And then the RAP document, and I left this out, and I apologize, it was not intentional, I just forgot to put it in, is the care plan. So the MDS and the RAP both funnel into the nursing care plan, which is probably, and like I said, I can't believe I forgot it, but is the other most important piece of the nursing home record. And the nursing care plan is part of the RN scope of practice. It's driven by the assessment and the data collection, and the medical diagnosis, the care plan. The care plan essentially says, I've taken all this information, my assessment from the MDS and the RAP, the medical diagnosis, from my own assessment of the patient, and I'm going to develop a plan of care. And the care plan is important because when you do have, an alleged injury, you want to see, did they recognize it in the care plan, and were they making adjustments to the care plan? So often, if there's a trigger for the RAP, there should be a care plan update. Once the care plan is in, it just doesn't stay there. It's like a breathing, living document. It should change as the resident's condition changes too. So those are three very important pieces. In acute hospitals, they do use care plans, but people generally aren't there very long. Again, in the nursing home, for most people, this is where they're going to be and remain till whatever the rest of their life expectancy is. The other piece that's different than acute hospitals is the nursing notes. And I mention here specifically Medicare and Medicaid. We do a summary note every 24 hours. In Medicaid, it depends on the state. It can be weekly or monthly. And basically, that's a summary that says, here's what's gone on, here's what we've done. It's an assessment, and it covers everything. So the nurses, the way we document in a nursing home is a little different. We don't necessarily document every shift. Some facilities we do chart by exception. What that means is when there is an event, we make a note about it. For the most part, people are status quo and things are going on and on. And unless there's a specific event or something that is different from the baseline, you'll see nurses' notes. But it is not unusual to see a day where there may not be notes. But I think just from liability standpoint, most of us, I know I usually just chart anyway, something, and coming into facilities just once in a while, I try to, I'm not familiar with the person, so you might see something and you might not. But if there is an event, again, you're going to look to your rack to see there was an event, it triggered. There should be a note if the family's coming in and saying on this day such and such happened. If there is an incident like a fall, you will see nurses' notes. They document them for each shift for so many days. So that you would know. You may not necessarily see the incident report because I know there's an issue with them being protected information, but you would know from the daily, each shift documentation done on each day. The other things that are different in the nursing home record are the weight sheets. Almost every resident has a weight. It's either done depending on their medical condition, and it could be daily, it could be weekly, it could be monthly. And when we get into the common types of cases you see with nursing homes, you'll see why weight sheets are important. And it's a physician order that will say, with consultation from usually dietary involved in it. We need weights every week. Dietary relies on those weight sheets to monitor how residents are doing with their nutrition. The ADL forms, that's activities of daily living. I referred to that with the electronic. You might see them in electronic or paper. Those are completed by the certified nursing assistants. Super important again. They're going to tell you on a day-to-day basis, and you can trend and see how somebody might come in, okay, they're doing okay, that they're able to get around themselves, and then there's a decline. And what we like to do is match sometimes those ADL forms with therapy sheets. The therapists have great notes all the time. Nursing notes, medications, dietary, to see if there was a pattern. Did the decline correspond to a change in medication? Did a decline to a change in a dietary pattern? I think you can see here that in nursing home, it's not a single event. Multiple things tie in together. Restorative therapy, that is pretty much just nursing home. They don't really do that in hospitals. Restorative therapy are for the residents who aren't skilled anymore. In other words, they've plateaued, they've reached a level, and this is it. Families decided they're going to stay in this location because they cannot be cared for safely at home. Restorative therapy is ways to do therapy that's pretty passive. It's not like aggressive physical therapy or occupational therapy, but it provides some function and mobility therapy for the residents. Recreation therapy, something else you won't see in the hospital record, but you will in the nursing home, and that refers to they have bingo, they have movies, they have various social activities, and I mean, when I work in the nursing homes, Lawrence Welk is on, things like that. They have various holidays because obviously people are from a certain generation. So these are things that are recreation, but they still provide a therapeutic benefit for, a lot of mental stimulation and social stimulation. You'll get a lot from those notes because you'll see, were they actively participating or did they just want to be in their room by themselves all the time? The other thing is Care conference or social work, this is different than care plan. Generally, they have care conferences, it's called, or it may be under the social work section. It involves the charge nurse, maybe the therapist, sometimes the physician, whoever's involved actively. Dietary is definitely there. And the family is always invited to these meetings. And basically, they discuss the status and family concerns of the resident. Here in this section, you might find where the family is making complaints or they're concerned about the level of care, the amount of care, things that they found. You might see that in care conference or the social work section. You may see the facility discussing it's possible that they're not able to care for this individual at the type of facility they have. So some of those discussions might be in this section. You won't find them necessarily in the nurse's notes, but you're going to look in this area. Photographs, these are multiple types of photographs. Generally not in an acute hospital record unless it involves a wound, but usually in a nursing home you'll have a couple photographs. You'll have the photographs on admission when the person came in, so that when we're passing out medications, we know some facilities don't always have ID bands, and so we know what this person looks like. So I have to be honest, sometimes they all look the same with their gray hair. If they do have wounds, they may, oftentimes I've seen pictures of the wounds. And I'll get to photographs later by the family. The other thing that you will see in nursing home medical record is the pharmacy is very involved. You might see this in an acute hospital record, but specifically it's required for nursing homes because there's a lot of issues with antipsychotic medications and things. They review, I want to say it's every 30 days, and it's a separate piece of paper that comes from the pharmacist. Now, most nursing homes do not have in-house pharmacists. The medication is provided by an outside facility like a Medco or Caremark. It may even be a local pharmacy that has contracts with nursing homes. The pharmacist reviews the medications. If there's any interactions, it's noted on there. It may say something like, "Dear doctor, we reviewed these. If the resident hasn't, especially for what we call PRN or as-needed medications, if the resident hasn't taken this medication in a while, they may ask, why is it still being prescribed? If they're taking it all the time and it's an as-needed, they may ask, why are we taking this all the time? You know, what is triggering this? They may recommend an alternative. This is a really important part for medication errors to look at. Did somebody alert them that based on their condition, this may not be a safe drug to take? Okay, Matt, we can change to the next slide.
Okay, it's on the next slide.
Okay, it didn't change on my screen yet, so.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay, I'll keep going. I have a copy in front of me.
Okay.
The other things that in the nursing home record that are not parts of the record, but I wanted to bring them to your attention because they're just as important. They help formulate additional pieces of the puzzle. A lot of family members will keep journals or notebooks or photographs. You know, they took pictures, they come in for events, birthdays, family occasions, and they'll take pictures. And I have that in a case we're working on now where you can see it's a really bad pressure ulcer case. And you can see almost the decline in his face, the weight loss in the man's stature. It's evident from the photos as we go on. The other thing is sign-in sheets. When a visitor comes to a facility, a nursing home will have to, you have to sign in. So that's really important.
Excuse me, Varsha. I'm going to reload the slide deck real fast here because it's not appearing on other people's screens. So let me just reload the slide deck.
Okay.
Okay? Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Okay, Varsha, I'm going to try to change the role to presenter. Now, can you click on the tab that says Review of Nursing Home? Do you see that tab?
Yes.
Can you click on that?
Mm-hmm.
And now can you advance the slides?
No, that little gray arrow is, no. I know it's supposed to, but it's not.
Right. Okay, let me go back and, do you see the slides on your screen now, slide number 3?
I do see slide number 3.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay. Well, you going to still keep changing the slides for me?
I will, yes.
Okay, great. Sign-in sheets, journals, notebooks, photographs from family members. Admission agreements, these are sometimes part of the chart, and they are related to whatever, this is a contract. That's important, and one of my attorneys told me, because we want to look for any binding arbitration agreements that might be in there. That's legal stuff, so I'm just going to mention that to make sure you view your admission agreements and ask your family members for those. Additional documents which are going to match up to see if there's any issues with the record, staffing schedules, something called a 24-hour report. Sometimes it's for the facility, it's a 24-hour report that's done. Any notebooks or logs. I know often at places that I work, we have like a notebook and we just write for the next shift or for on 3 to 11 and 11 to 7, there's usually not a nursing supervisor or director of nursing on. It's usually just an RN who's called the charge nurse. And we had a notebook or a log. And if there's any issues regarding residents' concerns that are not life-threatening or emergent, then we have those, write those issues down in this log, and then when the charge nurse or the DON comes in the next morning, they review those, and those things are then noted. That's really important, too. Any internal investigations that were done by the facility, you want to request those. Floor plans, really important, especially with your residents that have issues with dementia and falls, wandering. How far away were they from the nursing station? That happens it seems so simple, but it happens all the time. I have one right now, a fall. It's in an assisted living, but she was on the 2nd floor. It just didn't make sense for somebody who had dementia and has had a history of wandering. Floor plan also to see the exits and to find out if they're monitored, alarmed, are there cameras, things like that. Management and ownership charts, that gets into the legal aspect of the whole corporate responsibility, who owns this facility, what are the levels of management, those are the various things with that. The other thing that you would want to request along with the nursing home medical record is hospitalizations. If they're currently hospitalized, meaning the one that precipitated the admission into a skilled nursing facility, and any other previous ones that were related for whatever the alleged injury might be. When they transfer from a nursing home, they don't always come with the whole chart. They may come with like a transfer summary, the discharge summary, maybe it's an abbreviated version of the chart that they made a copy of any like diagnostics, labs, physician orders, if they're DNR, do not resuscitate, those various kind of things that are important for that. But it's by no means is it the whole chart. So you do want to see what happened before, because again, you're going to look at that to the MDS, to that admission, and to see, what were they like on admission. Okay, Matt, we can switch the page.
Okay, changing to slide number 4. Do you see that on the screen?
Yeah, I can see it on my screen. Very good.
Excellent.
Again, here's a list of other documents, and you can, I just want it to be noted that it's not just the record. Along with the record are all these other things that really help put this whole puzzle and piece together. Policies, procedures, related to each discipline, nursing, dietary, certified nursing assistants, administrative policies for staffing, Their agreements with Medicare and Medicaid. There's certain requirements they have to meet to be Medicare, Medicaid approved facilities. Patient Bill of Rights, and again, that goes back to the admission agreement. Incident reports, you might be able to get them. Budgets, staffing schedules, those directly correlate to, was there enough money to staff this place? And I ask for this often, the brochure, their website, any marketing material, because I have seen where they say they're one thing, and they got there and it was a totally different story. It wasn't really all that they said. Or they say things and, you know, families want the best place, and that's not really the level of care that they advertise. So those are important things to look at, too. Okay, Matt, you ready?
Changing to number 5.
Okay. Do we have, is this where we take a break or no? Or is that
First slide, master slide number 7.
Now, the common areas, and this is, I've taken this from a couple different places, from cases that I've worked, from things that I've seen, from presentations that I've gone to, kind of the hot button areas for nursing homes. The first one and the big one, which you could spend a whole day talking about, is pressure ulcers. And one of the things when we talked about the record, some of the important parts of that record that you want to see, obviously the MDS. Well, did they have this when they came in here? Or if they did, what was the stage? And I'm not going to get into detail in each of these because, again, they're their own whole day topic. But with pressure ulcers, was there one? Wasn't there one? How bad is it? The care plan ties in with what were the nursing interventions? Did they have them? Did they update them accordingly when the pressure ulcer worsened? Did they have some a wound care nurse or somebody trained in wounds to come in and address these? If there's a change, if they do develop a pressure ulcer or there's a change, it should trigger a RAP, the Resident Assessment Protocol. One comment about wound care documentation. It is not, there is a standard way to document wound care. And many of you, if you're familiar with the nursing home pressure ulcer cases, you've seen the wound care, like the flow sheets, and they, you know, monitor the wound care. There is no standard form for that. I work in 5 different places. They use 5 different methods to do that. It should cover certain amounts of information. The other thing you want to see with pressure ulcers is did they use a risk scale, such as a Braden scale, very important. We have a case now we're working on where we lined up all the Braden scales, and it is amazing to see just on a weekly basis the differences, how somebody thought they were a low risk one week and the next week they were a high risk. And it showed a pattern of they either didn't know what they were doing or just filled it out and didn't even, you know, if it's on the butt, roll the person over to look and see what was going on. Falls is the other area. With falls, you're going to be looking at restorative therapy, any physical, occupational therapy notes, again, the care plan, MDS, the RAP. This is where those CNA, ADL forms come in. You know, how much assistance did they need? Did they need assistive devices? You will also, one thing we do a lot with fall cases is we look at the medication sheets, the MAR, the MARs as they're called. And this would be maybe where you would want to look at your pharmacy sheets too, to see a lot of times the falls that are related to both the CNA not getting there in time, or they really weren't at the level that everybody said they were, and then there's medication thrown into the factor. Fractures, that ties back with falls, as well as fractures that just happen, you know, with a bed-bound resident, and you have a fracture, that ties in with the abuse. Your family care conferences are going to be important. You know, most of the time somebody had a feeling and voiced it or a concern, and it shows up in a care conference. That's what I've seen. Dehydration and nutrition. These are your weight sheets are going to be important. Again, ADL. Was somebody, if they weren't able to feed themselves, was somebody helping them eat, or were you just relying on family to come in? Dehydration and nutrition, you're going to look at those dietary sheets. Speech therapy, too, with dehydration and nutrition. If they weren't eating, or they were eating, they describe it as like 75% of their meal, 50%, 25%. If they went from 100% to 25%, and that continued, did somebody realize that? Did that trigger a speech therapy consult because they have a swallowing problem? We have two cases. One is choking on a hot dog and choking on a pork chop. On the one, there's multiple references to difficulty swallowing. There's multiple references, and you can match the CNA sheets and see that he was eating less and less and less, along with references from nursing about not having difficulty swallowing, and then in between dietary and speech therapy consults, and it was recommended to have an eval, and we don't have it, and apparently there isn't one. We've requested it, and they're saying there isn't one. We have the pork chop is he was on a specific kind of diet, and he was given a whole pork chop. And apparently that was going on for a while, and when they did an autopsy, they basically found like food had not completely digested down. So it's never just a single thing. It seems to be one thing ties into the other. Medications, really big area, the antipsychotics, over-medicating our residents, just giving it because we're ordered to give it. You can withhold a medication as a nurse, and, as you document why. Medication errors. I've seen a lot of those with insulin, again, where the resident isn't eating, and we're continuing to give them their oral, hyperglycemic or insulin, and then, you find them unconscious in the room with the blood sugar that's not even readable on the machine. Elopement and wandering. Here's where your floor plan, care plan, MDS. And also, was this facility equipped to handle this type of individual? Restraints, I don't really see that too much. I know I haven't really seen any of those. When I worked as a CNA back in the 80s and early 90s, I remember when those laws came into effect. And restraints are not just physical, they are also chemical, which ties into your medications, and then just the blatant abuse of a resident, which often photographs. I've seen families take photographs of bruises that they think are suspicious or make complaints to the State Department's ombudsman, which are reports that I mentioned earlier, investigations. Okay, Matt.
Okay, changing to slide number 6.
Okay, and this is what I really want to kind of drive home, that I have found in looking at records and working with other nurses who do this, it's never just a single event most of the time. It's linked to other things. So somebody will come in about a pressure ulcer or a fall, and then you'll see something with dehydration, you'll see something with medications. While not everybody in a nursing home is elderly, many of them are, the majority of them are, and they usually are there because they have multiple issues, medical issues, mental health issues. So it's not just one thing. It's multiple things that tie together. So in the choking case, it was actually a fall. And then we realized, there's a choking issue as well when we looked through the record. So you might have two separate issues or things that are linked together, and they just show a pattern of not basically paying attention. They're just not doing what's expected, what at least a minimum level these residents should have. Now, what I listed on this slide and the next slide you'll see the little funny mark with the 483s. These are the general headings of the Code of Federal Regulations that apply to nursing homes, skilled nursing facilities. And and I'll talk about this a little bit later in resources, but you can find these online, and then they break down into, what a resident, what's expected for the facility to provide the residents, and these are the areas, and you'll see they tie into the medical record. So I just wanted to just kind of bring that to everybody's attention. Okay, Matt, I think that's it, yeah. And here's
okay, we're going to take our first Q&A break. If you have any questions for Varsha, please use the chat feature, which is found on the right-hand side of the screen, to submit your questions, and we will answer them in the order that they come in. We have a question here from Stephen, who asks, where are physical therapy records kept? With the overall record or separate? Are PT centers part of the facility, or are they completely separate?
It's two parts to that question. Not all facilities have in-house physical therapists. They may have physical therapists who are like from an agency or contracted. However, the second part to that is the actual physical therapy notes are part of the record. And generally it's a type of like one sheet, and physical therapy does the same thing. All the therapies do. They do an assessment. They outline their goals, which is like their care plan, and then each time the person comes in, it's by date, and it's like a flow sheet. It usually looks like a flow sheet with space at the end for comments. They comment on their progress, but they are part of the record.
Okay, excellent. And going back to I believe slide number 5, we talked about common areas of nursing home negligence. Can you discuss what's the most common cause of negligence, and what can the nursing homes do to mitigate that?
I find, and it's two-part, one from looking at records and just from working, being a nurse, and I'd like to say I'm a good nurse, so I like to work in the nursing homes because I feel like at least I left the place doing something better for somebody. Staffing is definitely an issue. It's a lot to take care of these people. It's mentally and physically a lot. You have people asking you, where's their husband? He's been dead for 50 years. You've got meds, a lot of medications these people are on. Staffing and time, and I think people take shortcuts, so definitely staffing is an issue. I also think a lot of nursing homes use LPNs, which are licensed practical nurses, and they're not bad people. I just think there's a level of training with the acuity of some of these residents anymore. I mean, people have a lot of problems when they come into these places, and so it's a training, a staffing issue, and a lot of that goes back to the corporate end, paying to have enough staff, or paying to train your staff, spending the money to provide the correct both training, equipment for your staff to provide the right kind of care. I always usually take it back to the staff. I think there's like a level of laziness almost on parts, and people are there, they're just there to do their job, and they don't realize they don't have the correct tools or that. Or they do try to make recommendations and suggestions to the corporate, it's from the director of nursing above, the administrators, whoever the parent company is that owns that, and they just give up after a while. But staffing and training are two probably of the biggest things, and if they could step up to that, I think it would, I'm not going to say it's going to solve the problem because you have human factors involved. I don't know that it'll ever be solved, but that would help a lot. I see that often. If you're a nurse and you're on 3 to 11, it's you and pretty much one wing. If you're on 11 to 7, it's you and almost the entire, like one floor. So you may not have the time to get to everything, and you also equivalently don't have as many CNAs, and that is regulated by each state has, how many number of hours of care per resident and then staff per resident. So I hope that answered part of the question at least.
Oh, excellent. We have a follow-up here from Constance who asks, What is the best way to address late entries due to not having time to enter? However, written notes are there.
With late entries, it could be for various reasons. I think it's important probably to look at what is the late entry about. I've had situations where my goal is to get the resident transported to the hospital, call the family, call the doctor, and I may not sit down to write that note until the end of the shift, which you should have time to do that. A week later, no. Then you have to kind of see what happened. And then is it reasonable in that scenario to expect it later in the day or the next morning? Anything that's really beyond that, I would question as to why. You're supposed to document. It's a change in a resident's condition. It really should be in there. As soon as you're done doing the things that are necessary for the resident. A lot of times people just want to go home. So you might want to find out about staffing that day. Was this nurse covering for all these people and they're just tired and you just forgot about it until somebody audited the chart, meaning in-house they often will do an audit. The charge nurse, supervisor, DON will go through the charts when there is an incident. Sometimes it's just that, I forgot. If there's repeated late entries, again, then you have to kind of follow the trail to see what was the incident. And when you move forward in the case, that's an absolute question to ask. Why was this entered late? And what is it? Not all late entries mean there was something done wrong. That's I've done them late the next morning, but not a week later or a month later. No, then you have to question as to what was the rationale. Did somebody tell you didn't write a good enough note to cover yourself? So yeah, there should be an answer to that as you move forward.
Okay, great. We have a lot of questions in the queue. We'll do two more, and then we'll continue on with the presentation of content, and we'll get to all the questions at the second Q&A break.
Okay.
Eduardo asks, is there information listed for devices that are used to assist and help the resident?
Yes. One of the things, whether you're looking at, let's start from the beginning, MDS. If they need walkers, and I'm assuming that's what you're talking about, equipment like walkers, Hoyer lifts, which are those lifts to lift people out of bed, you may see that in the MDS. It would indicate that. You would see that in the admission note. You would see that in those ADL forms by the CNA that they need 2-person and a device to transfer, or 1 person and a device. You would see that in therapy notes. Therapy says, they need to use a walker. Most of the time people come in with the skilled need, so they'll have some initial therapy. When they were discharged from the hospital, were they using a walker and now for some reason they're not? That's another thing to look at. So if they are using an assisted device, it could be in one of those places. Most of these people, upon entry into the home, are using a device of some sort. Therefore, they're probably getting therapy, so you should see that. I usually go to therapy notes to see that. You might see in a 24-hour note when they do the summary, that Mrs. Jones ambulates down the hallway with the walker, or she uses a wheelchair to sit, but she ambulates down the hallway pushing her own wheelchair. So you will see that on admission. There's always something about what type of equipment. I've always seen it. About what type of equipment. Whether they continue to use it, that's a different story.
Okay, and we have one more question, and then we'll move on to the second part. We have a question that asks, where are the pharmacy records and notes kept?
There's medication administration records, which are, I gave, Tylenol at bedtime, which they initial off. So that's what's current with pharmacy. If something is discontinued, the nurses, you yellow it out and you write D/C and the date it was discontinued. If you're talking about pharmacy review sheets, I've seen them there's a separate pharmacy tab. I've seen them under consultations, And sometimes I've seen them in the notes section. Depends on the facility. They could be in one of the three spots if you're referring to those medication reviews done by pharmacy.
Okay, great. We are now on slide number 9, identifying potential problems in the record.
Okay, this part would be just, I know there's a lot of buzz on nursing homes and they are, you know, there is a lot of not good care that goes on. I will absolutely tell you that. But here's some of the problems you can run into, and you should be aware of. One, not reviewing the entire record. You can't just rely on one thing. Nursing home things are usually over a span of time. It's not like it happened in the operating room and the anesthesiologist at this one pinpoint moment made an error, or the surgeon made an error. It's usually you see a progression of issues. Therefore, if the family brings you records, you do need to go back and ask for that, you know, the official copy, and then compare the two and have somebody look at it to make sure. And those parts that I mentioned in what's common or standard in a nursing home are important because those pieces should be there. So not looking at the record, and along with the record, all the other things. Schedules, budgets, the corporate stuff. You're going to kind of tie them in together. Past medical history of any advanced diseases, and peripheral vascular disease, or PVD, is a common one where they've had amputations. Sometimes there are just disease conditions where there's just a bad outcome, and PVD is one of those. And we've turned cases down with those because it really wasn't, it's an issue of the disease, not necessarily the care. Pressure ulcers fall into this, avoidable versus non-avoidable. That is a whole, probably week-long topic, and there's some good resources. You can go to the Wound Ostomy Continent Nurses Society, which is WOCN.com, or the National Pressure Ulcer Advisory Panel, which is NPUAP, and I don't know if it's, I can't remember off the top of my head if it's .com or .org. A lot of good articles and information about avoidable versus non-avoidable. People have different schools of thoughts on that. So that's a potential area where it's a pressure ulcer and it really was not avoidable. This I alluded to, understanding that this event is not usually a single course of action. It's multiple points of failure along a longer period of time. Death certificate, that can throw a wrench in there. So whoever your physician expert or medical director expert, you want to have them to comment on the death certificate, the cause of death, because it's not related to necessarily to what happened, like a pressure ulcer. That might not necessarily be the reason they died. That's what the death certificate is going to list, something else, like sepsis maybe. Nursing home is skilled nursing facility, long-term care are the common terms they go by. Assisted living and personal care homes are different. They are not the same as a nursing home. They're not the same as a skilled nursing facility. And I'm going to touch on that in the next slides because it's a different, you could do another webinar on this, but it's a different beast. Okay, Matt, next slide.
Okay, on slide number 10, resources for nursing homes.
Resources which you'll need when you're reviewing these cases, the Code of Federal Regulations, the Long-Term Care Survey Book, which is like a pink reddish book. It contains these regs and something called F-tags. Within each regulation are various tags. It's like subcategories, if you want to just explain it like that. And when a surveyor comes in, the Medicare state surveyor comes in to survey your facility, and you're deficient in an area, you're cited by using the F tags. I think for pressure ulcer it's like F tag 314, and then you would be cited if there's a deficiency, and then within F tags there's a breakdown from A through L. It's a grid. And like A is, it was just happened, it was isolated incident, where L is, you get a lot of L's within those F tags. you could be potentially shut down. So within the code, the CFRs are F tags, and this book will go through all that. It's a thick book. You can look at Nursing Home Compare, which talks about the survey history, where were they deficient, what's going on. This was actually mentioned by an attorney at a seminar I went to, where it dealt with costs and budgeting to identify the level of spending at a nursing home in relation to food, staffing, and I know somebody asked me that question about what are some things they could do to mitigate that. This might be an area for a facility to look at. How much are we spending? Or how much didn't they spend? You can request licensure files from your individual state. And then within each state, there are websites, reports, and even each state has regulations. And I'll give you if you go to your state's, like Pennsylvania DPW websites and things, you can see what changes have been made in the state regulations for nursing homes. Okay, next one.
Okay, I'm on slide number 11, assisted living and personal care
I just want to touch on this really briefly because they are different. Assisted living and personal care homes, big difference is the level of care a resident receives and the freedom is different. Much less regulation in assisted living and personal care and generally set by each state. If you go to this website, the National Center for Assisted Living, and you just search under state regulatory reviews and changes, they have a document they prepare every year. It's a great document. It's broken down by state, and it goes through for each state what the changes are, what each term or definition within assisted living and personal care is. It's a really good resource. We're using it on a case now where we had a problem with wandering and the definition in an assisted living of secured exit ways because she fell down a stairway that was supposed to be at night secured through a keypad. And we were looking at those. There had been a change made in Pennsylvania this year that all facilities had to comply with. So just be aware that this is different, and within like a corporation, they can own a nursing home, an assisted living, a personal care home, and independent apartments. So just make sure you understand when somebody says, my mom or dad were in a nursing home, sometimes the lay person doesn't, they think it's all the same. And then the last slide is just a little chart I had found, and I kind of updated it, and that's slide number 12, Matt.
Yep, I'm there.
Just some of the differences between assisted living and nursing homes. By no means the end-all, be-all differences, but it just shows you, and that's what happens sometimes is somebody's assessed for an assisted living and it's not always the best environment, but they sell themselves as, oh, we can care for your loved one. And they do admission assessments. They don't have the same charts, the same pieces of papers as a nursing home. Their charts are generally smaller. Medications are not always given out by a nurse. They could be a licensed, certified nursing assistant who's licensed in just giving out meds. So there are big differences at times between assisted living, personal care, and nursing homes. And that's it. That's all. I hope I was able to impart something, provide some information to everybody.
Okay, great. Thank you, Varsha. We do have a couple questions in the queue. Would you like to answer them?
Yeah, that's fine. A few more minutes. That's fine.
Okay. Steve asked, what are some common problems associated with antipsychotic medication administration?
One is it the right medication to treat whatever the condition is? Were they evaluated by a psychologist or psychiatrist? A lot of times, if there is no issue, they do have those outside consults come in. You want to make sure that was there so that the person's on the right medication along with all the other medical conditions they have, that there's no interaction going on. if they already have an existing issue coming in with dementia or trouble sleeping or whatever it is, they do reviews on antipsychotics now and more documentation, because people, the elderly are they're just so sensitive to these medications. So if it's not working, is somebody paying attention? If they fell, were they just being over-medicated? And they're having repeat falls, are they looking to the medication? Ambien is one. We give that a lot in the nursing home at night. And, we really make sure we try to give that by a certain time, because you have to have X number of hours of sleep with it. If they are taking something and they're maybe getting up during the middle of the night, it's obviously not working. So the antipsychotics is efficacy of the drug or over-medication of the drug and proper evaluation of the drug. And if it's an as-needed drug, sometimes it's just given as needed. There should be documentation from nursing, because it is an as-needed. It's not a standing, daily medication. There should be, why was it given? If it was given 2 hours later or 3 hours later, there should be a note that says, yes, I gave them this medication and it worked. Or no, it didn't work, and then here's what I had to do. So it's usually over-medication, the right drug, evaluating by the correct professional to put somebody on that drug. And again, pharmacy saying, I see you have this medication and it's not working. And so it's a coordinated effort.
Okay, we have a question here from Ann who asks, have you seen a higher number of claims with residents admitted late on Fridays where implementation of normal therapies and evaluations are delayed?
No, I can't say I have. No, I can't say that.
Okay, we have a question here from Ernest who asks, do most states require assessments for residents going into an assisted living facility?
Yes. Yes, there is an assessment requirement, because they have to make sure that their facility is able to meet the needs of the individual, vice versa, that the individual is not so dependent on care that it's not the right place. If they need 24-hour supervision, an assisted living may not be the right place. So yeah, you do have to have an assessment. Now, the level of assessment may vary, and who does the assessment may also vary.
Okay, great. And our final question comes from Joel, who asks, in your experience, if something is not written in a record, do you find that most claimants will say that it didn't happen?
Yes and no, because we do chart by exception. So somewhere in that record, you usually find something that alludes to something that could have happened, or somebody else wrote a note that something happened, or it was mentioned somewhere else. So not always. It could be just they just didn't chart it because they just didn't do it. But it doesn't necessarily, they don't always say that it didn't happen.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Varsha.
Thank you, everybody.
And I apologize for the technical difficulty at the beginning. I don't think we missed any content. We went over slide number 3 kind of from the beginning once we got it up and running correctly. If you'd like to speak to Varsha about a specific case that you're working on, you can contact us here at TASA. Our number is 800-523-2319. As I mentioned during the introduction, we will be sending out a link to the archived recording of this webinar tomorrow morning. We will be sending out a copy of the PowerPoint as well in that email. Our next webinar for legal professionals is the Federal Tax Lien, and it will take place on April 12, 2012 at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. If you have any follow-up questions or comments, we do take everyone's comments under consideration, and they do help us to put together better programs. Please send me them, and like I said, I will take them under advisement, and they'll help us as we produce more and more programs. So you can email them to me at mhyde@tasanet.com. With that, I will end today's meeting and look for a follow-up email from me at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time today. Thank you again.